So we're here chatting with Lauren Waller, who's about to release her debut album, Talking to Myself. It must be an exciting time for you.
Yeah, it's really been a long time coming for me as an artist, and it is just such a great body of work that I think for me identifies what growing up was for me, what entering my 20s and kind of going through that stage of my life was. And it's a pretty multifaceted album where obviously there are cohesive parts to the songs and to my own journey, but I mean, being 20 and growing up in Los Angeles, it's very multifaceted, very different, and I think people are really going to be able to connect to it because of how varied it can be at times.
Yeah, now you've been making music for a while, so it's been quite a build-up to this. It must be great to finally get it out into the world.
Right, and what's actually funny about that is the first EP that I released, I think it was back in 2015 maybe, I was really experimenting at the time. I had no idea what type of music I wanted to do. I had never written before, and it all started out actually as a gift from my mom. It was either for her birthday or for Mother's Day, and I had no expectations. I was just writing for fun. And
you realize you're going to buy her a present for Mother's Day.
Well, hey, she took it as a gift. She took it, and honestly, like, my mom has been such a big supporter for me. I think she's excited anytime that I give her a song as a gift. I actually gave her one. I let her listen to a demo on Christmas this year, and I got her other things, but a demo on Christmas was also part of her gift. But when I was first writing, it was all these different genres, some very, very traditional singer-songwriter, very stripped down, some almost that are a little bit more like rock and roll, which I love because I grew up listening to all different types of music. And then with my second EP, which is called No Names Here, I was really starting to hone in on one very cohesive sound. And I loved that, and I loved getting to explore. I'm very influenced by the 80s, dark wave 80s, think like Depeche Mode. And that's kind of where that EP was gravitating towards. And then as I continued writing and I continued growing up and working on my skills, I thought, why do I want to be cornered into a box by one specific genre when I really can just experiment and play and write music that I feel good about and I feel proud to share with other people.
Yeah, great. And there's a range of influences on this record. There is a lot of 80s stuff in there. You know, you weren't here in the 80s. No. So how have you discovered that decade?
I just love the vibe of the 80s. I said when I performed the other night, I said that I've always found the 80s to be nostalgic. It feels nostalgic for me, even though I wasn't alive for a single second of it. But I think that's kind of a little bit of the magic of the 80s. When you look at the music from that time and the movies and the fashion, it just is also fun to me. I love how uplifting and light and carefree a lot of the music that came from that decade was. And I also love how it could be really gritty and dark at times. And then I also just loved watching 80s films when I was growing up. So it really just is a little bit of a comfort of going back to movies that I grew up watching and trying to translate that into my music.
What were your favorite 80s movies?
Heathers definitely was my favorite. Which they also, I'm a theater kid. I've always been a theater kid, and Heathers the musical was one of my favorite musicals that they put out, which is obviously based off of the movie. It's obviously a little bit of a darker film, but it also at the same time it has that it's light and it's funny, even though it's dealing with incredibly dark and serious topics. So it's one of those balances of what the 80s was, is that it could be a very odd, dark time, but light and happy at the same.
Yeah. And how about other influences? Who else inspired you to make music? I hear a little bit of Taylor Swift in your music maybe, or a bit of Alanis Morissette?
Absolutely. I love Taylor Swift. I literally grew up listening to her. I think I was in middle school, maybe 7th grade, when she really started taking off and gaining popularity. Alanis Morissette, obviously, I grew up listening to a lot of the music that my parents shared with me. My dad actually is a hobbyist musician, and so music has always been an incredibly big bond between the two of us. That actually, I started performing for the first time with my dad and his band, and he was in a cover band, and I eventually, when I revealed to my family that I can sing, my dad said, well, why don't you come up and jump up on stage with us one time? And that's how I actually started gigging and doing shows.
And what songs did you sing with your dad?
One duet that we would actually do a lot was Mama and the Papas' Dream a Little Dream of Me, and that was always really fun. And he picked it. He's the one who showed me it. I can't say, oh yeah, I just found Mama and the Papas alone. My dad showed me it. But I also did cover songs by like Katie Tunstall, Black Horse in a Cherry Tree, Suddenly I See. I actually loved Little Mix in the early, this is 2012, 2013, Little Mix Wings had just come out, and that actually was, I told my dad and his band, I'm like, we're doing this song, I really want to perform this song. And they said, oh, okay, like we're used to maybe more classic rock, but sure, we'll add a Little Mix into the mix.
Yeah, how did your dad feel about being made to play a Little Mix? Or?
He loved it. My dad is very much the same as me. He loves all music. We don't really discriminate against genre. I used to always tell people I hate country music, but that's not really true, because country music at its soul, at its core, is really fantastic storytelling. And that's all I ever want to do with my own music. I want to tell a story. I want people to be able to connect and relate to it. And the lyricism that comes from country music, and even the tones and the influences and the instruments that they use, always tells a story. And so I can't really say anymore, oh, I don't like this genre, I don't like that genre, because everything is something that you can pull from and be inspired by.
Yeah, well, you're telling a few stories certainly on the record, right? Mm-hmm. Talking to Myself, why is it called that? Hopefully you won't just be talking to yourself on this one.
I named it Talking to Myself because actually that's what it felt like I was doing. Most of my songs start out basically as diary or journal entries. It was a way, when I started songwriting when I was 18 years old, I had never really been able to fully express my emotions before. I've always struggled a lot with anxiety and depression, and when I started songwriting, it was a release. It was really cathartic to put things literally down onto page. And not everything gets shared, obviously, but once you share it with other people, it really is just a release into the world, and other people can connect to it. And so as I was writing these songs that are on Talking to Myself, that's what it was. I was literally talking to myself and talking myself through heartbreak and love and happiness and sadness and anxiety, everything that comes along with life. It was all just coming straight from me and piecing it all together. So I guess I was talking to myself a little bit, just muttering to myself in the corner, but that's why I thought it was the perfect name for it.
Yeah. And what do you hope people will get from these songs in general? What do you hope they'll take away?
I've always said that if I am able to share with somebody my music and my songs and they're able to connect with it and it can help them in any way, that's my goal as a songwriter. The first person who ever made me feel that way was Sarah Bareilles. And I was in middle school at the time, and I heard her song Gravity, which I connected for myself to depression, and it changed my life. It made me absolutely fall in love with music. I was really fascinated with how did this person who I've never met before, just through a song, make me understand my emotions better. And so that's what I want for anybody who listens to this album. I want them to be able to connect to the joy in it and think of somebody that, like, if I'm singing a love song, I want them to be able to think about somebody that they love. Or if I'm singing a song that's a little bit filled with anger and rage, I want them to be able to listen to it and maybe connect to it and somehow find a little bit of relief in knowing that somebody else understands like what I'm going through right now.
Sure, and there's lots of great songs on there, but let's talk about a few of them. Where should we start? Should we start with Backseat? That's first on my list here.
Love Backseat.
Tell me about that song.
A Backseat is a love song, but it's also a little bit cheeky and it's a little bit flirty. It's about hooking up with somebody in the backseat of a car. And actually, Backseat was written to a track. So one of my writing partners and producers, Ryan Benyo, I went over to his studio one day and he played me a bunch of tracks that he had been working on specifically for me. And I immediately was drawn to this one. And he had actually just named the file. He said, I can't name all these random files, just like song 1, song 2. So he named it Backseat. And he said, you don't need to write about like what the title is. You can do whatever you want with it. But I was so inspired immediately. I wrote the chorus I wrote half of the chorus in maybe 10 minutes because I was just like immediately inspired by it. I think this is such a fun song. Let's do something that's a little bit cheeky, a little bit flirty, and write a song about hooking up with somebody in the backseat of my car.
Does he do that for all the songs now then? Does he? Let's see if I can make a sing about this.
No, not always, but it actually did work out well. There's a few songs on the album where that's exactly what happened. Was I was just inspired by the title, and I've been working with Ryan for years now, and he's a good friend of mine. So, and I really respect, like, if okay, he was feeling this vibe, let's see if I can try to make it work, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, and he's fine with that too.
Right. Well, next song, let's talk about City Lights. Tell me about where did the inspiration for that come from?
So City Lights was inspired by, so my writing team is myself, Ryan Benyo, and Monty Malone. And Monty Malone actually came in with the idea for City Lights. He and I actually both showed up on the same day at the studio, and I had written a completely different song, absolutely different from what he has written. City Lights is it's fun and carefree, and it's inspired about living in Los Angeles and the city lights that you see and kind of just what you go through in your 20s. And I had written just a completely different song that didn't work, and he started showing me some of the lyrics that he had written, and he had the chorus basically, I think the chorus that he came in with that day is what we hear on the track, and I just absolutely immediately fell in love with it. And we ended up taking a few pieces from my song where I was like, I don't even want to share it, I don't think it's gonna work. Ryan and Monty said, no, let's hear what you have and see if we can work and envelop any of that into what has now become City Lights. And so there's pieces from, I think my full original bridge on the version of the song I wrote is the bridge that we ended up using for City Lights. So it's kind of just a combination of all of our minds coming together. And it's a song about being carefree and love, but also heartbreak and sadness at the same time. It's kind of just about struggling and trying to get through life as an artist, as a person, and as a young woman.
Do you take quite a lot of inspiration from Los Angeles, from living here?
Yeah, I grew up here. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and then when I was in high school, we moved out a little bit further to Ventura County. But now I'm back living in the San Fernando Valley, and I've always been so inspired by the diversity and the diversity of people in Los Angeles, the diversity of art that you see come through. This really is a beacon for artists, is Los Angeles. You always hear like the big coastal cities is really where artists are going, and it's been an incredible blessing in my life to have been raised here. And I've only ever lived in LA. I ended up going to college in LA. I go to school now in LA, and it's all I've ever really known, but I don't feel hindered by that. I feel like I've just constantly been surrounded by inspiration, and I probably will move out of Los Angeles one day in a few years to see what else the world has in store, but as of right now, I've yet to grow tired of this city.
Well, and of course, there's a bit of a love letter to it on the album, isn't there? With Best Coast to California in general. So that's a good old-fashioned California party anthem.
Yeah. So it's Best Coast. I think is by far one of the most fun songs that I've ever written or even kind of listened to. I love Best Coast. It's a little, I don't know, is it embarrassing to like be in love with your music? Maybe a little bit, but I'm really proud of it, and I really do love Best Coast. I went to school in Malibu, so there's references to Pacific Coast Highway on the track, kind of like Dolls Always Watching You, which is a reference to like Malibu Barbies, and it really is a love letter to California. It's a love letter to my partying days. I definitely don't party as much as I used to, but it's a love letter to that as well.
And what's going to happen when you play it in New York or somewhere on the other coast?
They probably won't like it very much. I don't really know how to rhyme, how to even change it. You know, some artists, they go to different towns and cities and they're like, oh, I'll just throw in the city name. I don't really think East Coast, Best Coast is the The greatest rhyme right there. But I mean, people will either love it or they'll hate it. I think people can respect that, even if, I mean, there's always California haters, there's Los Angeles haters, but at the end of the day, everybody kind of wants to be here. They want to end up here, they want to visit here, they want to enjoy our weather.
Well, as you say that, as we speak, it's raining outside, so you know, might not be quite so popular if that carries on.
I know if the rain continues, which we do desperately need, if the rain continues, we may be in some trouble there with our bragging rights. That really is what we have, is we have the sun, so we may need the sun to come back a little bit faster.
I'm sure it'll come back one day. Well, I'll be back home by then, certainly. But and let's talk about one more song. Let's talk about Green-Eyed Jealousy. I'm guessing this is a song that kind of does what it says on the tin, right? What were you going through when you wrote that?
So it was about a friendship ending, actually, which I think a lot of people have listened to it and assume that it's about a relationship, which I get it was about a relationship, just not a romantic one. And it was about a really great friendship that I had for years. And I thought that this person would kind of be in my life forever. And we haven't spoken in the last few years, which at the time was like incredibly angering and frustrating to me. And I didn't really know how to verbalize it. And then 2 years after we stopped talking, that's when I wrote Green-Eyed Jealousy. And I didn't really know how I was feeling at that point, where I didn't know if I was sad that I wasn't their friend anymore. I didn't know if I was happy or I was relieved. And then I sat down to write Green-Eyed Jealousy, and it just all came pouring out. And I realized as I was writing it, you know, you had a really great friendship for a long time, and I'm always going to remember them for that. But at the same time, I think that I'm a little bit better off not having them in my life anymore, which is sad to say, but I say in the chorus, you're not worth the time you spend on my mind. And I realized that's what I was doing for 2 years. I just kept thinking about, well, what if I had done this, or what if they had said that, or just trying to work through the what ifs. And I was like, I don't need to work through that anymore. I'm happy where I am in my life, and I think that they're happy in theirs too. And at the end of the day, like, that's all that matters, is that we're both happy. So
how do you feel about them hearing the song? Will they recognize themselves?
I don't know. I have thought about that. And I actually, what's funny is when I performed it the other night, I had friends in the audience who, they all know. They know that I'm not friends with this person anymore. And none of them said anything to me. So I was like, okay, maybe if they're not picking up on it, that person will never. But at the same time, I don't even know if they'll listen to it. So I guess I don't really care. is a little bit of a harsh answer, but I don't really care if they pick up on it. That was my second EP, which I named No Names Here. I named it that because I said I'm never going to tell people who the song is about, who any of these songs are about. So I'm never really going to confirm or deny like what any song is about because of that. I just would rather say this is just how I feel. And obviously, as an artist, you do dramatize some things. You do make things a little bit more dramatic, but at its core, most of my songs come from a really honest place.
The Taylor Swift approach.
Yeah.
Never confirm.
Never confirm, never deny.
She's a good teacher, obviously. And so the record's coming out, very exciting. What are your ambitions for it? What would you like to see happen with it? Because I'm guessing you're hoping this is the first album of many.
I would love to see, like I said, I would love to see people really connect to it and find a little bit of a home in it. I, growing up, was always such a fan of whoever I listened to. I really wholeheartedly become a fan of a person's music and of their personality and of what they stand for. And I really would love to garner a little bit more attention and gain a little bit of a larger fan base. I love the people who already listen to my music, and everybody has always been so supportive of me. So that's a goal, is to garner a bit of a fan base. And then I also hope to maybe continue growing globally. I've had the immense privilege of gaining traction in more than 50 radio stations across the world. I've been able to do several different interviews throughout the UK, and I really just hope to continue growing that support and growing a more global and international fan base. And obviously, what every musician wants to do, well, I want to tour. I would love to tour the album. That would be really exciting.
Do you have plans to come over to the UK or other places?
I actually am going to be in London at the end of May. Yeah, I'm going to be in London at the end of May this year, and so hopefully I'm going to set up a few meetings. I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing any shows while I'm there, but definitely going to be there to be making more connections and just seeing what can happen with the promotion of Talking to Myself.
Excellent. Well, you'll have some lovely wet weather that you seem to enjoy so much.
I actually do like the rain. I mean, being from California my entire life, I don't mind the rain at all. I know some people just absolutely hate it, but like, bring on the cold weather.
You're going to love London. Don't worry about that. And tell us a bit about yourself outside of music. So now, I've interviewed a lot of musicians, and not many of them put themselves through law school while making music, but that's what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. That must be challenging. That
is to put it lightly. I have always loved to be really busy. That's how I grew up. I grew up doing a million different activities because I was very, very lucky to have parents who wanted me and my brother to be able to explore whatever we wanted to do. Very much always like sky's the limit type of family. Oh, you want to try? I used to do oil paintings. I used to do master duplications of oil paintings. So like the greats like Van Gogh, Monet, Manet. I used to, as a child, do all of that. And that gave me a skill set, I think, for the rest of my life, where I've always been very creative. And so doing art as a child brought me into doing theater as a young adult, which then brought me really into doing music. And so when I decided to make the decision to go to law school, it was a really hard one. It happened in the midst of the pandemic, where I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. That was a time in my life where I was going, what am I doing? Like, what is going on in my life? I was working professionally in a theater. I was working professionally with music and playing a lot of shows. And all of a sudden that all goes away. And you're left with, okay, I don't really feel that great right now. I'm not that happy with sitting at home all the time. I'm not that happy with trying to do live stream and live shows, which I know some artists really found a lot of success in doing, but it just didn't feel right for me. And so I started thinking, what have you always loved to do? And that is genuinely to learn. Somebody asked me last week, what do you love most about law school? And I said, I love actively learning again. And I realized as an artist and as a musician, I have such an opportunity to better educate myself on all the complexities that go behind the music industry. It's an incredibly complex field of law, and I'm really excited. Next year is when I will be able to start taking courses in music law, in entertainment law, and really dive in deeper to that. And that's kind of how I ended up in law school. Is I said, okay, like I want to better educate myself, and I want to better equip myself as an artist. And I actually was really inspired by Maggie Rogers, who she, after hitting such success in her career, made the decision to get her master's from Harvard. And I'm not going to Harvard, but I am going to a incredibly respected and just excellent law school. And I was inspired by Maggie Rogers, and I thought, okay, if she is the same type of person who wanted to learn more and really wanted to dive in deeper into being a multifaceted person, and I just love that, and I thought I want to do that too. I am a multifaceted person. I have multifaceted interests, and I want to develop them.
And anybody who offers you a deal now, it'll have to be a good one, won't it? Otherwise, legal training will kick in.
One would hope.
And if that wasn't enough, so you also do some voluntary work as well.
Yes.
Right? Tell us about that.
Volunteering has always been a huge part of my life. I grew up actually a part of this organization in the United States called National Charity League, and it's a mother-daughter philanthropic organization, and we worked with different charities like Guide Dogs of America, the Cancer Discovery Shop, things like that. And I loved it. It was always instilled in me that volunteer work is incredibly important. It's incredibly important to take whatever privilege that I have and pour it into other communities and organizations that need the time and need the help but don't have the resources necessarily to always pay for it. And because I developed that at such a young age, I've always wanted to make sure like to always be giving back in some way. And when I was in high school, I was on the mock trial team, which is you basically just put on a fake trial. So that's the law. The law did not come out of left field for me. Both my parents are actually attorneys.
It's all making sense now.
So I grew up, and I in high school I was on this mock trial team, and because I stayed close to home to go to college, I continue volunteering with that school, and I work still to this day with really just fantastic high school students who are also excited to learn about the law. But really, they're learning about performance. When you're putting on a fake trial, I always ask the students when they're auditioning, oh, do you have any theater background? And sometimes they're like, why would I need theater background? And I'm like, because you're learning how to get up and speak in front of people. You're learning how to perform. And I always said, oh, you don't really need to you don't need to become a lawyer to be interested in this mock trial program, because it just teaches you really fundamental skills about how to be a better communicator, how to be a better advocate, and just really learn how to talk to people and stand in front of a crowd and really put in all this work to come down to one final moment. I think it's really exciting. So I love working with the high schoolers still today.
Yeah, so playing live and being in court are not so different as people might think.
Honestly, not really. It's all a show. Like, I mean, even in real life court, people will say, like, you really are putting on a little bit of a show if you're doing a jury trial where you're in front of all these different people. You have to convince them. And how are you supposed to convince somebody if you don't know how to speak, if you don't know how to perform a little bit?
And tell us a bit about you. So you describe yourself as a queer artist, is this correct? Is this obviously important to you in the music you make and the lyrics you write? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I have always known since I was like 6 years old, I've known that I like boys and I like girls, and that was really weird and kind of challenging in the circles that I was running in. I was actually, I'm no longer affiliated with the Catholic Church, but I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I went to a Catholic elementary school, and then I went to a Christian high school, and then I went to a Christian college, and then now I'm in a Christian law school. And so not everybody has always loved my queerness, clearly. And it was a little bit interesting to learn how to navigate those circles. And for a long time, I've never been ashamed of my identity. I've never been ashamed for a single second about that. But you kind of have that thought in the back of your head saying, do you really need to make this about a girl when you can just so easily say he in the lyric? And I did that for a little bit. I did that for a while because I didn't want to close any doors. As a young artist, as a young independent artist, I was like, I don't know how anybody's going to react to this. So for a long time, the majority of my lyrics really were just about boys, which is fine because they were honest and true stories about guys that I was involved with or seeing or whatever. And in the last few years, I kind of have stopped caring, which I think comes with growing up a little bit. I've stopped caring that much about what other people are going to think about me. People are allowed to make their own decisions and judgments on me, and if somebody doesn't want to like my music because I'm a queer artist, then honestly, I don't really want them as a fan, you know?
Yeah. I mean, how does it feel to sort of put all that out there? Obviously, music's very honest, very confessional. It's about to go out into the world. How are you feeling about that? I'm excited. I'm really, really excited to get to share a very authentic version of myself. And that's talking to myself feels authentically like Lauren Waller. It feels authentically me. Brilliant.